I know you have been lying awake at night, watching shadows stretch across your ceiling, feeling the weight of silence as it pushes against your chest. I've seen how you smile for others while carrying an ocean of tears within, how you check your phone hoping for a message that might ease this unbearable solitude. Your heart whispers questions in the darkness that your mind cannot answer. Will this emptiness ever end? Has God abandoned me in this valley? I come to you now, not with quick remedies that fade by morning, but with a lantern to illuminate the sacred path through pain, a path I have walked myself, a path that leads not around suffering, but through it, to a clearing you cannot yet see. I remember the night when all companions had left me, when even the words of my poetry failed to comfort. My breath came shallow, my hands trembled with the weight of abandonment. That night, I discovered something that will change how you view the darkness you now inhabit. Pain is not the enemy, beloved. Resistance to pain is where suffering multiplies. I learned this truth on a winter night in Kenya, when the desert wind howled outside my window like a wounded animal, and my heart felt just as wild with grief. I had lost everything that gave my life meaning. My teacher Shams had disappeared, and with him went the sun from my sky. I paced the cold floor until my feet ached, crying out to God, bargaining for relief that would not come. What transformed me was not escape from this dark night, but surrender to its depths. I ceased struggling against the current of pain and allowed it to carry me. The moment I stopped fighting what God had placed before me, a small flame ignited within that no wind could extinguish. This flame was not happiness. No, do not misunderstand me. It was presence, pure, unadorned presence. Even now, as you read these words, your mind may be searching for a quick exit from your suffering. This is natural. The body and mind instinctively pull away from what burns. But I ask you, with the tenderness of one who has walked through fire, can you sit with your pain for just 3 breaths without naming it enemy? Can you observe it as you would a storm from a window, powerful, temporary, separate from the one who witnesses? I learned to whisper, Dios, estoy aquí en este dolor, estoy presente. God, I'm here in this pain, I'm present. This simple acknowledgement changed everything. Pain remained, but suffering, the struggle against what is, began to loosen its grip. In the silent space that opened, I could hear something beyond my own desperate thoughts, the faint melody of divine companionship. Let me share what I discovered in the center of my darkest night. Silence is not absence. Silence is the language God speaks before all other languages. When your friends offer empty consolations, when advisors give strategies that fall flat, when even prayer feels like calling into an echo chamber, this is when true prayer begins. True prayer is listening with the entire body. It is becoming a vessel for presence. I placed my hand upon my heart one night and felt its steady rhythm beneath my palm. I realized this pulse had continued faithfully through every devastation, every joy, every mundane moment of my life without my gratitude or notice. This heartbeat was a gift I had never properly received. I began to synchronize my breath with this rhythm, and slowly, the scattered pieces of my attention gathered into a single point of awareness. Try this now, beloved seeker. Place your palm over your heart. Feel its determined rhythm beneath your fingers. This is not merely blood and muscle. This is divine persistence. This is God saying, I am here. I continue. I have not abandoned the vessel of your body even when your thoughts have abandoned hope. Breathe slowly as you feel this miracle of continuation. The secret I learned through tears is that God hides within what we most wish to avoid. The door we fear to open contains the very light we seek. When I finally stopped running from my grief over Shams, I found him everywhere, in the curve of the moon, in the taste of water, in the silence between my heartbeats. What I thought I had lost had simply changed form. What seemed like absence was actually a more subtle presence. The wound is where the light enters you. This truth is contrary to what the world teaches. The world says, cover your wounds, hide your scars, pretend wholeness. The sacred path says, honor these openings. They are doorways through which divine love pours. Your current pain is not meaningless punishment. It is sacred initiation. I began each morning by sitting in silence for the length of 40 breaths. I acknowledged the pain still present in my body, the grief still circling in my chest. I did not try to banish these feelings, but rather bowed to them as teachers. "Show me what I need to learn," I whispered to my suffering, and slowly, wisdom began to bloom from the soil of sorrow. Offer your pain this dignity. 3 minutes of witness without judgment. Sit each morning before the world's noise invades. Place your hand upon your heart and simply observe what moves within you. Do not label any feeling as good or bad. Do not rush toward comfort. Simply say, "I see you. I honor you. I listen." This small practice became my anchor when storms of emotion threatened to drown me. I discovered that even the most intense feelings would rise, crest, and eventually recede if I gave them space to move without resistance. In this allowing, I found a strange and quiet power that no external circumstance could shake. The darkness you inhabit now is not your final home. It is a cocoon of transformation. What feels like disintegration is actually reconstruction at a level you cannot yet perceive. The caterpillar does not understand the purpose of its dissolution until wings unfold. Trust the wisdom that orchestrates galaxies and heartbeats alike. Trust that this current pain is not meaningless chaos, but sacred alchemy. I promise you this, not as empty comfort, but as one who has traversed the territory you now walk. The same hand that allows suffering also holds the balm of healing. God has not abandoned you to this pain. God walks within it as your innermost witness and companion. The divine presence you seek is not waiting on the other side of this valley. It is the ground beneath your feet, the air in your lungs, the silence between your thoughts. Rest your questioning mind for a moment. Let your shoulders soften. Breathe as if this breath itself is prayer. In this simple presence, without words or demands, you take the first step on the path that transforms suffering into awakening. This is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your deepest knowing. I carried my wounds like precious stones for many years, polishing them with memory until they gleamed. Each disappointment, each betrayal, each failure became an amulet I wore close to my skin, hidden from others, but always present to me. I believed these wounds defined me, gave my life its particular shape and meaning. I was wrong. What I thought gave me identity was actually preventing my true self from emerging. When Shams first entered my life, he looked directly into these secret wounds without flinching. I tried to hide them as I had always done, wrapping them in clever words and scholarly justifications, but he saw through my elaborate coverings. "Those are not jewels you carry," he said to me one evening as we walked beneath the stars in Kanya. "They are stones weighing you down in an ocean that wishes to raise you." His words struck me like lightning, illuminating a truth I had been too afraid to see. We all do this, beloved. We mistake our wounds for our wisdom. We confuse our past with our purpose. We build shelters from the materials of old pain and then wonder why we cannot feel the sun. I see you there, holding tight to what has hurt you, recounting the story of your betrayals and losses, until the telling itself becomes a kind of prayer. I know this devotion to pain. I practiced it with the precision of an artist. I know you carry something heavy from your past. I sense how it colors every new experience, how it whispers warnings when joy approaches, how it reminds you of all that was taken so you will not risk having something taken again. I want to ask you a question, and I ask you to be honest with me and yourself. What would remain of you if you laid down this burden even for one day? If this question touches something real inside you, if you recognize this struggle, write in the comments. Today, I choose to set down my heaviest stone. When you share this, you are not just freeing yourself, you are lighting a candle for someone still walking in darkness. Your courage to speak truth may be exactly what another soul needs to hear today. There came a morning when I woke and realized I had been dreaming of the desert for weeks. In these dreams, I was digging holes in sand, burying objects I could not clearly see, covering them with stones so I would remember their location. Night after night, the same desperate activity. When I mentioned these dreams to Shams, he laughed with such tenderness that tears came to my eyes. "You are trying to preserve what needs to decompose," he said. "Those things you bury with such care are not treasures. They are seeds that cannot sprout until you stop unearthing them to check if they still exist." I share this wisdom with you now. The past requires our recognition, but not our constant attendance. Your wounds deserve acknowledgement, but not worship. What happened to you is part of your story, but it is not the whole book. God does not ask you to erase these chapters, only to stop rereading them when new pages await your attention. I learned to practice a simple ritual that changed how I carried my past. Each morning before dawn, I would write on a small piece of paper one memory that continued to cause me pain. I would hold this paper in my palm, close my eyes, and say, "I honor what this taught me. I release what this cost me." Then I would place the paper in a bowl of water and watch the ink dissolve, the fibers soften, until what had seemed so solid became part of the water itself. Neither destroyed nor preserved, but transformed. You might practice something similar. Take one specific memory that continues to wound you. Write it down with all its sharp edges and dark colors. Hold the paper between your palms like a prayer. Say aloud, "Te honro por lo que me enseñaste. Te libero de lo que me costaste." Then place it in water, or burn it safely, or bury it in earth, not to forget but to transform, not to deny but to digest. The past must be metabolized to become wisdom rather than wound. I have lost what I thought I could not live without, and discovered that life continued with unexpected grace. I have been abandoned by those I trusted most deeply, and found that solitude contained treasures I would never have discovered in company. I have watched wealth dissolve between my fingers, and learned that the truly essential remains when all else falls away. These lessons did not come easily. Each one demanded a surrender that felt like death. God places in our lives exactly the teachers we require, though rarely in the form we would choose. That person who betrayed you, the opportunity that vanished, the dream that crumbled, the health that faltered. These are not random cruelties. They are curriculum. The divine hand writes lessons in a language that often feels like loss. Our task is not to question the teaching method, but to extract the essential learning. Dios no es un juez que te castiga por tus errores. Es un maestro que te ofrece lecciones para tu evolución. God is not a judge punishing you for mistakes. God is a teacher offering lessons for your evolution. This understanding changed how I viewed my most painful memories. What if everything that wounded me was actually preparing me for a depth of compassion and wisdom I could not otherwise have achieved? What if the very experiences I resented were actually answers to my deepest prayers for growth? Place your hand on your heart and whisper this truth. My scars are not my shame. They are my scripture. Feel how your body responds to these words. There is wisdom in the flesh that the mind often ignores. The body knows when truth is spoken. It relaxes around reality and tenses against falsehood. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders drop. Allow this new perspective to sink beyond thought into the marrow of your being. The past does not need to be perfect to be sacred. Your story does not need to be flawless to be valuable. God reads the book of your life with more compassion than you have ever allowed yourself. The divine eye sees beyond the torn pages and coffee stains to the essential beauty of the narrative. Can you begin to view your history with even a fraction of this tenderness? I learned to sit with my painful memories as one might sit beside a frightened child, not to fix or change or silence, but to accompany with gentle presence. When regret would rise like a wave, I would place my hand on my heart and say, "I am here with you now. You are not alone in this." This simple gesture became a bridge between the fragmented parts of myself, the one who had suffered, and the one who could now offer compassion to that suffering. Try this practice when the past knocks loudly at your door. Place both feet firmly on the ground. Feel the earth supporting you in this present moment. Acknowledge the memory that has arrived, not as an invasion, but as a visitor seeking understanding. Say to this visitor, "I see you. I honor what you carry. But this moment is also real, and in this moment I am held by something larger than pain. Then, take 3 slow breaths, feeling the air fill and leave your body, anchoring you in now rather than then. The most profound healing comes not from erasing the past, but from expanding our relationship with it. What wounded you has also shaped you. What broke you has also revealed your capacity to mend. The darkness you have walked through has taught your eyes to distinguish even the faintest light. These are not consolation prizes. They are the actual purpose of the journey. I promise you this truth, tested in the laboratory of my own suffering. Nothing is wasted in the economy of the soul. Every tear, every disappointment, every shattered expectation becomes compost for new growth if we allow it. The divine gardener wastes nothing. Even our most bitter experiences become nourishment for the seeds of wisdom planted within us, waiting for the courage of our attention. There came a night in my life when the stars themselves seemed to withdraw their light. I had prayed for days without pause, recited the holy verses until my voice grew hoarse, followed every ritual with perfect precision. Yet heaven remained silent. My heart felt like an abandoned house, with dust gathering in corners once filled with divine presence. I paced the floors of my small room in Kanya, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the emptiness that surrounded me. "¿Dónde estás, Dios, cuando más te necesito?" I cried out, my voice breaking against the stone walls. "Where are you, God, when I need you most?" The question itself became a wound, for I had built my life upon the certainty of divine companionship. Now that certainty wavered like a candle flame in wind. I had counseled others through their darkest hours, offered wisdom about faith during difficulty. Yet here I stood, a teacher without answers, a guide who had lost the path. The prayers that once flowed like clear water from my lips now felt like stones I struggled to lift. The sacred texts that had illuminated my understanding now seemed like encrypted messages I could no longer decipher. The practices that had sustained my spirit for decades suddenly felt hollow, mechanical movements without meaning. I continued them anyway, clinging to routine when revelation had abandoned me. I bowed my head to the prayer mat, though my thoughts scattered like birds startled from a tree. This is the moment I never spoke of in my poetry, the darkness too complete to capture in verse. I share it with you now because I sense you have stood in a similar night, where all that once made sense has dissolved, where the foundations you built your life upon have shifted beneath your feet. I want you to know you are not alone in this experience. Even those whose words now guide others have walked through valleys where guidance seemed absent. What I discovered in that void was something no teacher had prepared me for, something I had to learn through the direct tutelage of absence. The greatest surrender is not giving up what we hate, but what we love. Not relinquishing what we know is harmful, but what we believe is essential. I had to surrender my image of God to find God. I had to let go of my understanding of faith to discover what faith truly was. My breakthrough came not as lightning, but as the smallest shift of perception. One evening, exhausted from fighting my spiritual desolation, I simply stopped. I ceased all effort. I abandoned the struggle to feel what I could not feel, to know what I could not know, to be who I could no longer be. I sat in my barren room and finally allowed myself to be exactly as I was, confused, empty, lost. To my astonishment, that complete surrender created a tiny space within the solid wall of my despair. It was not dramatic. No angels sang, no light filled the room. But something infinitely subtle changed in the texture of the moment. I noticed my breath, entering, filling, leaving my body in a rhythm that continued without my conscious direction. I observed the moonlight as it made its patient journey across my floor. I felt the cool night air against my skin. I was alive, breathing, perceiving. This simple fact suddenly seemed miraculous. In that moment of pure attention, I recognized a presence that had never left. It was not the God I had imagined, pictured, conceptualized throughout my years of study and devotion. It was something both more intimate and more vast. It moved in my breath. It observed through my eyes. It had been with me throughout my despair, not as an external savior waiting to be invoked correctly, but as the very awareness with which I experienced everything, including abandonment. If these words are touching something deep in you, If you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here, I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you. Each week, we explore together the terrain of the soul, not as abstract concepts, but as lived experience. I want to give you a practice that emerged from my night of deepest struggle, something you can turn to when prayer feels impossible and hope seems a distant memory. I call it the surrender of one breath. It requires no special knowledge, no spiritual advancement, no faith beyond the willingness to try. Find a quiet place where you will not be disturbed. Sit or lie down in a comfortable position. Close your eyes. Place one hand on your heart and the other on your abdomen. Now, focus all your attention on a single breath, not improving it, controlling it, or judging it. Simply experiencing it fully, the sensation of air entering your nostrils, filling your lungs, the slight expansion of your ribs, the gentle rise of your abdomen, the pause at the top of the inhalation, the release as you exhale, the subtle relaxation at the end of the breath, the moment of stillness before the next breath begins. Just one breath, experienced completely. In this practice, you temporarily surrender everything: your past, your future, your identity, your questions, your certainty. You become nothing but present awareness riding the wave of a single breath. This is not escape. It is return. Not transcendence, but embodiment. When the mind wanders, as it naturally will, gently bring it back to the physical sensations of breathing. No criticism, no frustration, just a patient returning again and again. I practice this surrender of one breath each morning before dawn, and each night before sleep. Sometimes once is enough to reconnect me with the ground of being. Sometimes I stay with it for 20 minutes or more, one breath following another, each one an opportunity to practice complete acceptance of what is. This practice has carried me through grief that felt unsurvivable, confusion that seemed impenetrable, loneliness that appeared endless. What makes this practice powerful is its radical simplicity. We are not reaching for spiritual heights or extraordinary experiences. We are simply meeting the ordinary miracle of our existence, breath by breath. In doing so, we discover that the divine is not hiding in complexity, but in the simplicity we usually overlook. God is not absent. God is overlooked, present in each moment, waiting for the gift of our attention. I learned through my darkest night that faith is not what I thought it was. It is not constant emotional certainty. It is not unwavering mental conviction. It is not even consistent spiritual experience. Faith is the willingness to remain open in the face of not knowing. It is taking the next step when the entire path is shrouded in fog. It is trusting the process of life itself when its meaning escapes our understanding. The great secret I discovered is that God does not need our perfection. God does not even need our certainty. All that is required is our willingness to be present with what is, exactly as it is. When I finally allowed myself to fully experience my spiritual emptiness, without resistance, without self-judgment, without desperate attempts to escape, I found something waiting in that emptiness that my previous spiritual fullness had obscured. There is a teaching in this that goes against everything our achievement-oriented world values. Sometimes the way forward is to stop moving. Sometimes the solution is to stop solving. Sometimes the answer comes only when we abandon our insistence on answers and make peace with the question itself. This is not passivity. It is a different kind of action, the action of complete presence. I remember how Shams once watched me struggling with a philosophical question for days, consulting texts, arguing positions, growing increasingly frustrated. Finally, he took the books from my hands and said, "The answer will never come through the door of effort. It will slip in through the window of surrender when you have exhausted yourself with trying." At the time, his words seemed like a riddle designed to frustrate me further. Now I understand he was describing the exact process that unfolds in the spiritual journey. The mystics of all traditions speak of this surrender, this letting go that paradoxically becomes the greatest finding. The Desert Fathers called it kenosis, self-emptying. The Taoists speak of wu-wei, non-doing. The Sufis call it fana, annihilation of the separate self. These are not poetic metaphors, but precise descriptions of a transformative process available to anyone with the courage to release their knuckle-white grip on control. I invite you to experiment with surrender in one small area of your life where you have been straining, pushing, forcing without results. Not as resignation or giving up, but as a conscious shift from the effortful energy of making things happen to the receptive energy of allowing things to unfold. This is not about external circumstances, but your relationship to them. Can you soften around a difficulty? Can you create space around a problem rather than constantly attacking it directly? I have found that even 5 minutes of conscious surrender can shift the energy of an entire day. Sit quietly and identify one situation where your effort feels like pushing against a locked door. Visualize yourself stepping back from this door. Feel the immediate relief in your body as you cease the pushing. Breathe into that space of non-doing. Then ask, not with your problem-solving mind, but with your receptive heart, what wants to happen here that my effort has been preventing? The wisdom that emerges from silence is different from the knowledge we acquire through study. It arrives not as concepts to be understood, but as direct knowing that changes us at levels deeper than thought. It often comes in paradoxes that confound the logical mind while illuminating the intuitive heart. Strength through vulnerability, finding through losing, living through dying. I leave you with this truth, earned through the darkest night of my soul. What you are seeking is seeking you with far greater determination and perfect precision. Your task is not to strain toward it, but to remove the obstacles you have placed in its path, primarily the obstacle of believing you must make your journey alone, through your own effort, according to your own map. Surrender this illusion, even for one conscious breath, and feel how the universe rushes in to support you in ways your mind could never have conceived. The morning after my night of surrender, I woke to find the world unchanged, yet entirely different. The sun cast the same light through my window. The sounds of the marketplace still rose from the streets of Kanya. My body carried the same aches, my mind the same questions. But something had shifted in how I met these familiar elements of my life. I understood then what would become the foundation of all my teaching. Transformation is not about changing what we see, but changing how we see. I had spent years seeking dramatic spiritual experiences, moments of ecstasy and revelation that would lift me beyond the ordinary world. Now I recognized that this seeking itself had been a subtle form of escape. The divine was not hiding in rare moments of transcendence, but in the humble fabric of daily life, waiting to be recognized. This recognition would not come through occasional intensity, but through consistent presence. What I am about to share with you may seem too simple to transform your life. The mind craves complexity, believing that profound change requires elaborate methods. But I discovered that the most powerful practices are those simple enough to be sustained through all seasons of the soul. The practices that carried me from spiritual crisis to abiding peace were not esoteric techniques known only to mystics, but basic disciplines available to anyone willing to commit to them with faithfulness rather than fervor. The first discipline is what I call conscious silence, not the absence of noise, but the presence of listening. Each morning before my duties began, and each evening, as the day concluded, I would sit in silence for the length of time it takes for a stick of incense to burn down. I would place one hand over my heart and simply feel its movement beneath my palm. I would breathe naturally, neither controlling nor judging the breath, but simply witnessing its rhythm. I would allow thoughts to arise without following them, emotions to surface without drowning in them. This practice of conscious silence was not meditation as many understand it, with techniques to focus or empty the mind. It was simpler than that, just being with whatever arose in my experience without resistance or grasping. I did not seek special states or insights. I simply practiced being present, moment by moment, with what is. This presence itself became the teacher, revealing patterns of thought I had never noticed, reactions that had operated below awareness, spaces of peace that had always existed beneath the surface of my mental activity. I invite you to begin this practice today. You need no special preparation, no perfect environment, no advanced spiritual understanding. Simply set aside 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening. Find a place where you will not be disturbed. Sit comfortably with your spine straight but not rigid. Place one hand on your heart, close your eyes, breathe normally. When thoughts come, notice them without judgment, then gently return to the sensation of your breath and heartbeat. Say silently, "Aquí estoy." Here I am. The second discipline that transformed my life is what I call daily order. Each morning I would perform one simple act with complete attention, making my bed, arranging my writing materials, sweeping the floor of my room. The task itself mattered less than the quality of presence I brought to it. I would feel the texture of the blanket between my fingers, listen to the sound of the broom against stone, notice the pleasure of creating order in one small corner of existence. This practice might seem trivial compared to lofty spiritual aspirations. Yet I discovered that how we do small things shapes how we do all things. The care I brought to making my bed gradually extended to how I listened to a troubled student, how I prepared food, how I wrote my poetry. External order created a foundation for internal order. The simple satisfaction of completing one mindful task each morning set a tone of presence that could carry through days filled with complex challenges. Choose one small act of order that you will perform each day with full attention. It might be making your bed with care, arranging items on your desk, preparing your morning beverage mindfully, or setting out your clothes for the next day. Do not rush through this task or treat it as an obligation to be completed. Approach it as a sacred ritual, an opportunity to practice presence in action. Feel the sensations in your body as you move. Notice the pleasure of bringing order to something within your control. The third discipline, which completes this trinity of practice, is daily devotion. Each day, I would perform one act of service or express one specific gratitude. This was not abstract goodwill, but concrete action. I might carry water for an elderly neighbor, write a letter of encouragement to a student in difficulty, prepare a meal for someone in need. Or I might write in my journal one particular blessing from the day, not general gratitude, but appreciation for a specific moment of grace. The taste of fresh bread, the kindness in a stranger's eyes, the solution to a problem that had eluded me. This practice of devotion anchored my spiritual life in relationship rather than self-improvement. It reminded me daily that awakening is not a solitary achievement, but a way of participating more fully in the interconnected fabric of existence. The moments of service or gratitude became windows through which divine presence could enter my ordinary life, transforming routine into ritual, obligation into opportunity. I encourage you to adopt this third practice alongside the first two. Each day, perform one small act of service without seeking recognition or calculating return. Or write down one specific moment from your day for which you feel genuine gratitude. Be concrete rather than abstract. Name the person, describe the moment, identify the exact nature of the gift you received or gave. This specificity anchors spiritual practice in the texture of lived experience rather than floating above it in concept. These three practices, conscious silence, daily order, and active devotion, form a trinity of discipline that supports transformation without requiring dramatic life changes or special circumstances. They can be practiced in wealth or poverty, health or illness, community or solitude. They require no teacher besides your own commitment, no equipment besides what you already possess, no special knowledge besides what emerges from your own experience. I discovered that faithfulness to these simple practices gradually changed everything while appearing to change nothing. Like water shaping stone, not through force, but through consistent presence, these disciplines reshaped my consciousness, my relationships, my work, my very experience of being alive. The change was not sudden illumination, but gradual clarification, not dramatic conversion, but quiet revolution. I share this wisdom born of experience, not theory. When the heart discovers discipline that rises from love rather than obligation, it finds freedom rather than constraint. The world teaches that freedom comes from doing whatever we desire in each moment. I learned the opposite truth. Real freedom emerges from commitments we honor even when desire fades. When I remained faithful to these practices through periods of enthusiasm and periods of dryness alike, I discovered a deeper current of joy that did not depend on circumstances or feelings. Place these 3 stones in the foundation of your day. 5 minutes of conscious silence morning and evening, 1 act of mindful order, 1 concrete expression of service or gratitude. These are not techniques for achieving spiritual heights, but practices for discovering divine depth in ordinary life. They do not require you to become someone else, but invite you to be more fully who you already are. The path of heart discipline leads not away from your humanity, but deeper into its sacred essence. My commitment to these simple disciplines did not produce immediate fireworks in my spiritual life. There were no visions, no voices from heaven, no sudden dissolution of all difficulty. For many weeks I simply practiced, often wondering if anything was happening beneath the surface of my awareness. I continued in faith rather than evidence, trusting the process when results remained invisible. This itself was the first transformation, learning to value faithfulness above feeling, consistency above intensity. Then, one ordinary morning, as I sat in my daily silence, I noticed something subtle yet significant. The constant commentary that had filled my mind for as long as I could remember, judging, planning, remembering, worrying, had grown quieter. Not completely silent, but less insistent, less compelling. Small gaps had appeared between thoughts, like spaces between clouds that reveal glimpses of the vast sky behind them. I had not banished thought through force of will. Rather, thought had naturally begun to settle through consistent, gentle practice. This change was so understated I might have missed it had I been seeking dramatic spiritual experiences. Yet its effect on my daily life was profound. I found myself less reactive to provocations, less consumed by worries about the future, less entangled in regrets about the past. The world had not changed, but my relationship to it had shifted in ways both subtle and consequential. I was beginning to live from a different center, responding rather than reacting, choosing rather than being driven. I share this with you as encouragement for your own journey. The transformation you seek may be happening already beneath the threshold of your recognition. The practices that seem small and inadequate may be working more deeply than you realize. Trust the process even when evidence is scarce. The most important changes often begin invisibly, like seeds germinating underground, before any green shoot appears to confirm their awakening. Another sign emerged in how I related to difficulties. Before my practice deepened, I had divided experiences into those I welcomed and those I resisted, pleasure versus pain, success versus failure, praise versus criticism. Now these sharp divisions began to soften. I found myself able to meet challenging situations with the same presence I brought to pleasant ones, not because I had become indifferent to pain, but because I had discovered something within that remained stable regardless of outer circumstances. I remember a day when a student publicly challenged my teaching, questioning my understanding in front of others in a way that would have previously triggered shame and defensiveness. Instead, I felt a curious space open within me, room to hear his question without taking it personally, to consider its merit without needing to protect my position, to respond from wisdom rather than wound. This was not detachment, but a more complete engagement, one that included the questioner's need alongside my own. This capacity to remain centered amid difficulty extended beyond interpersonal challenges to physical and emotional ones as well. When illness came, I could experience discomfort without being consumed by it. When financial problems arose, I could take practical action without drowning in anxiety. When loss occurred, I could feel grief fully without being defined by it. I was discovering what the Sufis call the rock in the center of the stream, that which remains unmoved while all else flows around it. Perhaps the most surprising transformation appeared in my relationship with time. Before, I had lived in constant tension between past and future, rehashing old regrets, anticipating coming challenges, rarely fully present to the actual moment unfolding before me. Now I found myself naturally more present, not through effort but as the fruit of practice. Colors seemed more vivid, flavors more distinct, conversations more meaningful, simple pleasures more satisfying. Life had not become more spectacular, but I had become more capable of experiencing its existing richness. I noticed these changes first in solitude, but soon discovered they extended into my interactions and work as well. My teaching became less about impressing students with knowledge and more about creating space for their own discoveries. My writing flowed more naturally, less from striving to produce and more from allowing expression to emerge. Even my practical responsibilities became opportunities for presence rather than tasks to complete before life could begin. What you may find most remarkable as your practice deepens is how these inner changes naturally manifest in outer order. Without conscious planning, my external life began to align with my internal values. Relationships that depleted vital energy gradually fell away. Work that did not serve my deepest purpose either transformed or released its hold. Possessions that created more burden than benefit found their way to others who needed them more. This was not the result of dramatic decisions, but of small, consistent choices flowing from a more centered place. The ancient wisdom says, "As within, so without." I discovered the living truth of this principle. The order I cultivated in my inner garden, through silence, daily discipline, and devotion, naturally extended to create order in my outer landscape. The clarity I found in moments of quiet reflection gradually infused my actions and choices. Problems that had seemed hopelessly complex began to simplify, not because circumstances changed, but because my perception cleared. I carried phrases in my heart that stabilized this new way of being. El silencio fue mi maestro. Silence became my teacher. Cuando ordené mi alma, la vida también se ordenó. When I ordered my soul, life itself found order. La constancia es más poderosa que la intensidad. Constancy is more powerful than intensity. These were not affirmations I repeated to convince myself of what was not yet true, but recognitions of what I was actually experiencing, landmarks on a path of transformation. Here is a truth I discovered that contradicts what the world teaches. The extraordinary hides within the ordinary, waiting for the eyes of devotion to recognize it. We seek special experiences, dramatic interventions, rare moments of transcendence. But the divine presence we long for already saturates every moment, concealed not by its absence, but by our inattention. The practices I have shared do not produce God's presence. They simply develop our capacity to notice what has never been missing. I remember walking through the marketplace of Kanya one afternoon, surrounded by the same sights, sounds, and smells I had experienced countless times before. Yet on this day, everything appeared transfigured, not by changing its nature, but by being fully received. The call of the vendor, the texture of fabric beneath my fingers, the aroma of spices, the faces of strangers, all revealed a depth and beauty I had previously missed while physically present, but mentally elsewhere. I realized then, paradise is not a future state, but a present quality of awareness. This transformation of perception may be the most significant sign of spiritual maturation. The world does not need to change for your experience to be revolutionized. Your circumstances do not need to improve for your life to become rich with meaning. The shift happens not in what you see, but in how you see, not in what you do, but in how you do it, not in what you have, but in how you hold it. Let me offer an aphorism born from my journey. The breath that knows itself as prayer transforms the day into a temple. This is not poetic metaphor, but practical reality. When ordinary awareness is infused with presence, the mundane becomes sacred, not by changing its appearance, but by revealing its essence. The same task performed with mindfulness rather than mechanical habit becomes a doorway to the divine. If you have practiced faithfully for some time and wonder if anything is changing, look for these subtle signs: moments of unexpected peace amid difficulty, decreased reactivity to provocations, natural arising of compassion where judgment once dominated, increased capacity to be with what is without immediately needing to change it, enjoyment of simple pleasures previously overlooked. intuitive knowing that transcends logical analysis, spontaneous gratitude replacing chronic dissatisfaction. These signs may appear so gradually you barely notice them, like watching a child grow day by day. Others may recognize the change in you before you fully perceive it yourself. Trust that the practices are working beneath the surface of awareness, reshaping your consciousness in ways that will eventually become undeniable. The transformation you seek is not a destination you reach, but a garden you tend, with growth occurring according to seasons and laws you did not create and cannot control, yet faithfully serve. I discovered through long experience that spiritual maturation resembles the ripening of fruit more than the building of a structure. We cannot force the process through intensity of effort, but we can provide the conditions that support natural development. The disciplines I have shared with you create those conditions, the proper soil, water, light, and protection that allow the seed of divine consciousness already planted within you to flourish according to its inherent design. I speak to you now from a place I could not have imagined when my journey began, when pain drove me to my knees and doubt clouded my vision. I do not claim perfection or constant ecstasy. I am still human, still subject to the full range of emotions, still learning daily from each encounter. But I have found what might be called a reliable center, a place of return that remains accessible regardless of external circumstances or internal weather. This center is not a fortress that protects me from life's difficulties. It is more like a clear spring that continues to flow whether the landscape around it blooms with flowers or lies covered in snow. I've learned to return to this spring again and again, to drink from waters that restore perspective when confusion arises, that provide strength when challenges overwhelm, that offer clarity when decisions must be made. The greatest lesson I have learned, contrary to what many spiritual teachings suggest, is that awakening is not an escape from human experience, but a deeper immersion in it. We do not transcend our humanity. We discover its sacred essence. We do not rise above our emotions. We learn to feel them more completely without being consumed by them. We do not detach from the world. We engage with it more authentically, free from the distortions of fear and grasping. I once believed spiritual growth meant leaving behind the ordinary world for some transcendent realm. Now I understand it means discovering the extraordinary within the ordinary, the sacred within the seemingly mundane. The transformation happens not by going elsewhere, but by being more fully here, not by becoming someone else, but by recognizing who we have always been beneath the layers of conditioning and protection we accumulated along the way. This truth challenges much of what passes for spiritual wisdom in the world. We are told to seek special states, to have extraordinary experiences, to become exceptional beings. Yet the path I discovered leads in the opposite direction, toward embracing our common humanity with uncommon presence, toward finding the divine in the dirt of everyday existence, toward recognizing that heaven is not above us but within and around us, hidden in plain sight. The practices I have shared are not means to an end, stepping stones to be discarded once some imagined destination is reached. They are rather the shape that awakened life naturally takes, the rhythm of consciousness that has remembered its source. I continue my morning and evening silence, my daily acts of order and devotion, not to get somewhere else but to honor and express what I have found to be true. The practices themselves have become expressions of gratitude rather than techniques of attainment. Here is what I promise from my own experience. If you commit to these simple disciplines with faithfulness rather than perfection, with patience rather than urgency, your life will gradually transform in ways both subtle and profound. The change may not match your expectations or arrive on your timeline. It may not look like the spiritual ideals you have been taught to pursue, but it will be authentic, integrated, and sustainable in a way that more dramatic approaches cannot provide. I have watched students chase peak experiences, collect initiations, master complex techniques, and still find themselves fundamentally unchanged in how they meet daily challenges and relationships. I have also watched those who committed to simple, consistent practice gradually embody the very qualities others were seeking through more exotic means. The distinction lies not in the flashiness of the approach, but in the integration of the outcome. Let me offer a final aphorism distilled from decades of experience. What you seek through struggle waits for you in surrender. This is not a call to passivity, but an invitation to a different kind of action, one that flows with rather than against the current of life. The divine presence you long for is not hiding from you. It is waiting for your attention to shift from seeking to recognizing, from achieving to receiving, from becoming to being. Put your hand on your heart now. Feel its steady rhythm beneath your palm. This heartbeat has continued faithfully through every joy and sorrow you have experienced, through your darkest nights and brightest days, through times of faith and periods of doubt. It has not required your attention or gratitude to maintain its essential function. This is a perfect metaphor for the divine presence that sustains you even when unrecognized, that continues to offer life regardless of your awareness. Breathe slowly as you feel this miracle of continuation. Say softly, "Aquí estoy, Dios." Here I am, God. Not as a plea for presence, but as a recognition of what has never been absent. Let your shoulders soften. Let your breath deepen. Let the space between your thoughts widen like the sky between clouds. You are not creating this moment of connection. You are recognizing what has always been true beneath the noise of a distracted mind and a hurried life. The practices I have shared are simply structured opportunities for this recognition to deepen, for attention to be reclaimed from its habitual dispersal among 1,000 concerns and return to the fundamental miracle of being. They are not meant to add complexity to your already busy life, but to create islands of simplicity where essential truth can be remembered and embodied. If this message has resonated in your soul, subscribe and be part of this awakening journey. Each week I bring wisdom for those who have chosen the path of true transformation. And leave in the comments, "I choose presence over escape." This simple declaration marks the beginning of your journey back home, back to yourself. As you move forward from this moment, I offer 3 practices integrated into one daily covenant with your own deepest nature. Upon waking and before sleeping, give yourself the gift of 5 minutes of conscious silence, hand on heart, breathing naturally, simply being present to whatever arises without judgment or analysis. Choose one small act of order to perform each day with complete attention, creating external harmony that reflects and reinforces internal coherence. Offer one concrete expression of gratitude or service, anchoring spiritual awareness in relationship rather than isolation. These practices are not burdens to bear, but gifts to unwrap, not obligations that constrain, but invitations that liberate. Approach them not with grim determination, but with gentle curiosity, not as tests to pass, but as experiments to conduct, not as achievements to complete, but as relationships to nurture. When you forget or falter, as all humans do, begin again without self-judgment. Consistency matters more than perfection, intention more than execution, direction more than distance. Remember that the purpose of all spiritual practice is not to make you special, but to remind you of what you share with all beings, the capacity for presence, the hunger for meaning, the longing for connection, the potential for awakening. The truly illuminated life does not separate you from others, but joins you more deeply to the common journey of humanity, with its universal suffering and its universal potential for transformation. I bless your path with this final truth. Pain is not evidence of spiritual failure, but the raw material of awakening when met with compassionate presence rather than resistance. The silence that sometimes feels like abandonment is actually an invitation to a deeper listening. The order that might initially seem constraining becomes the foundation for authentic freedom. And the small acts of service that appear insignificant are the seeds from which genuine purpose grows. Go now into your life, carrying these simple practices like lanterns that illuminate not just your individual path, but the shared journey of all who seek to remember what has never been lost, to return to what has never been absent, to awaken to what has only been overlooked in the rush to find elsewhere what already exists here. The divine presence you seek is seeking you with infinitely more persistence and precision than you're seeking. Your task is not to manufacture this connection, but to remove the obstacles to its recognition. Trust the unfolding of your unique expression of the eternal pattern. Honor the particular form your awakening takes, which may not resemble the spiritual ideals you have been taught to pursue. Know that authentic transformation often happens not through dramatic rupture, but through faithful presence to what is, moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. The divine does not need your perfection, only your willingness to remain open in the face of all that life brings. I leave you with this prayer that is also a promise. What appears as absence is only a deeper form of presence waiting to be recognized. What seems like silence contains wisdom that cannot be spoken in ordinary language. What feels like emptiness is actually fullness beyond the mind's capacity to categorize or contain. The darkness that frightens is not the absence of light, but its seed form, gestating in conditions that will, in perfect timing, allow its emergence. Trust this process as the universe trusts it, without hurry or doubt, with the patience of mountains and the persistence of rivers finding their way to the sea.